All right, everybody, we're live on the post-game Ask Anything for DK Pittsburgh Sports. I'm Eddie Provident. With me is Jarrod Prugar. We are here to talk about what everybody wants to talk about, the 36-10 loss by the Pittsburgh Steelers at the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs. Really nothing good to talk about with this football game, so we'll get into questions here in a minute as we get started, as people start filtering in. Just in case you've never been here before, how this works, throw your question in the comment section on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, and we will get to them when we can. We'll try to go in order. We'll go for about 20 minutes, half hour. But Jarrod, getting started off, what was your thoughts on this football game?
Well, I mean, if they left Matt Canada there, I think they would be better off. Just some of the decisions that he made, play calling wise, why? I mean, you target Ray McLeod how many times? Like the one that got me was a flea flicker to Ray.
Yeah. Oh God.
Like, what are you doing, dude? Like, what? Why? Like, just why? There were so many times today where that was the case. Ben threw the ball 35 times, 23 for 35, 159 yards, a touchdown late when it didn't really matter, and one interception. I mean, and you're going up against a banged up Chiefs team. Like, they didn't have Travis Kelce, but again, credit the Chiefs. They didn't miss a beat.
No.
And I mean, that's the biggest thing for me. I mean, the Chiefs is good or one of the best coach teams in the league, but man, the Steelers just didn't get off the bus today.
No, they really didn't. It was bad play calling, bad playing, bad execution, bad everything. Let's get right into it because we're already getting peppered with comments here. The first thing that I want to post up here is because this is the one I wanted to talk about. Sean Jameson on Facebook says, "Let's run more toss plays." Jarrod, it's 4th and 1. Everybody in the NFL knows that the Steelers' offense is their Achilles heel is the offensive line. So what do? They run a toss play to the outside to Najee Harris with nobody there, literally nobody there to block.
There were five red helmets there.
to one Steelers helmet. It was absolutely pathetic. Why do you make that? I try so hard to give coaches in the NFL the benefit of a doubt because, as you do, you coach high school sports. I'm on a high school football coaching staff. You know how difficult it is to coach sometimes. You know how hard it is to be on the sidelines or up in the booth and make certain calls, even at a high school level. So on a pro football level, I understand that it's that much more difficult. But what in the world are you doing making that play call in that situation, Jarrod? I don't understand it.
Yeah, I didn't understand it either because it's 4th and 1. I mean, obviously you want to get the ball in Najee Harris's hands. That is probably the one thing that I do agree with there. But the offensive line has been abysmal. But you're throwing it, and it's it's to the sideline side of the field. So you're not, or the near side of the field where you don't have much space. So you're running right into. So essentially, you have 6 defenders right there because you have the sideline, the 5 guys, half the Kansas City defense. So you're running to nowhere. And that, to me, get him in the open field and get him able to get away from guys and get him into space. Because if you get Najee Harris into space, usually it ends up pretty well. But when you run a toss play to the near side where you just don't have, any space,
it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
You get your playmakers in space, and good things typically happen. And Harris has done that constantly this year. But when you just make that boneheaded play, just stay there and enjoy the barbecue.
Yeah, exactly. Same kind of situation here. We're talking about, play calling. Squishy Waffles says, why do we feel the need to constantly run RPO slants? That's another good point. I'm not a fan of the RPO, especially with the offensive line that we have with someone like Najee Harris, where the idea with Najee Harris is you just want to get him going, north and south as fast as possible. I feel like RPOs don't do that. The other thing with RPOs, you're kind of taking away what the Steelers do best, and that's getting things off fast. The Steelers, when they are in the no huddle, even if it's not the hurry up, when they're in the no huddle, that's when they're at their best on offense. The RPO kind of takes all of that away and makes it come down to a split decision at the offensive line or at the line of scrimmage. Case in point was the RPO, where I think it was in the first quarter where Roethlisberger threw it to Ray McCloud, and it was kind of behind Ray, but Ray dropped it. But he also had Deontay Johnson kind of with a step on, on his defender on the slant, and he probably should have hit Deontay Johnson. And that's one of the things, again, that I don't like about the RPO is that not only is it that split decision, are you going to run or pass, but it's a split decision on who you're going to pass to, because there's probably going to be a free defender coming at the quarterback, so he's got to get the ball off quick.
Right. And I mean, anytime you have to read, it's not always the greatest situation because your running back's probably not getting a chance to go downhill, might have a step behind him to make that key block. But the slants, I mean, you got to have separation, but you also have to catch the football. I mean, too many times they're hitting the balls, hitting receivers in the hands, or it's a bad throw. Ben did not look the greatest tonight by any means. They mentioned the broadcast about him having his family there, whether that was because of the holidays or because just the clock is ticking. Well, it's both, and the clock is definitely ticking on Roethlisberger. I think that's fair to say. I think as we wind down here this year, I do think this will end up being his last year. But yeah, I mean, the RPO has to be quick, and when efficient, it works. But it's not efficient when you don't have an offensive line and your receivers don't help you out. It's a two-way street. You have to pass the football, and you have to catch the football. The receivers just aren't getting the job done. Now, it does not help when you target Ray McCloud 8 times.
No, that's another one I don't get, and I know that hasn't been a question yet, but I do want to talk about that. Feel free to, even if it's not a question, if you have a comment about this whole thing with the, we'll talk about Ray McCloud for the next couple minutes. Why in the world are you giving the ball to Ray McCloud when you have Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and James Washington as your other 3 wide receivers? And I realize that James Washington has been underwhelming this year, but James Washington is, in my opinion, a much better receiver than Ray McCloud. Chase Claypool, for all of his warts, for all of his headaches, for all of his hangups, is on a completely different stratosphere than Ray McCloud when it comes to talent and just physical ability. And Deontay Johnson is right now their number 1 receiver. Why is Ray McCloud getting the ball and getting as many targets as he is? I don't have an answer for it. And again, this comes back to coaching, scheming, what the offensive line or what the offensive coordinator is responsible for. I don't like it. I don't understand it. I don't like it. And, I think in the offseason, there has to be some reckoning at some point. Like, I realize the Steelers ownership and their front office are slow to move when it comes to stuff like, coaching changes and personnel changes. They're a very loyal organization, and that's been good for the past 60 years. But at some point in time, man, like, this is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, the first move I would make is just leave Canada wherever he is. Just stop. But again, like back to McCloud, like on the flea flicker, which I watched this game and I thought it was a stand-up comedy routine when the Steelers were on offense. They had a flea flicker, and okay, let's add up all the gimmicks. And then you target your 5'9" receiver and you throw the ball up where it's a jump ball. There are not very many 5'9" players that are going to go up and get a ball. And of course, it ended up in Kansas City's hands. So, I mean, there was a point in time where when Claypool got his taunting penalty, he was benched. Ray McCloud was still on the field. Like, he made one play, got 15 yards for taunting, and he was still on the field. I mean, yes, Deontay Johnson, I think, is the best receiver that they have, or he's playing like a number 1. Claypool is young and immature. I think he can get the job done, but you got to let him grow. You got to let him grow on the fly. And unfortunately, the Steelers are not in a position where that's really conducive to their success. But at the same time, he made some pretty good catches or pretty spectacular catches in the second half when it really didn't matter. But, I mean, when Ray McCloud is one of your top targets, I mean, just looking at the stat line here on ESPN, Ray had 8 targets. Deontay Johnson had 9. Chase Claypool had 6. And Najee Harris had 7. So I mean,
yeah.
And neither and everybody else other than Deontay Johnson was 50 yards or under. And Ray McCloud was targeted 8 times, had 4 receptions, 25 yards. That one play was what really helped him at 17-yard reception, and then that was essentially negated because he got a 15-yard taunting penalty.
Yep.
Down 30 points.
How do you get a taunting penalty down 30 points? That's another. I mean, there's so many things that we can sit here and complain about and just baffling things with the Steelers football team. Here's one. USAF 8791 can't win without a strong O-line. I agree 100%, and that has been the story of this football season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. When they were going there on that, a 4-game winning streak in the middle of the season, or towards the beginning of the season, what was working for them? The O-line was clicking, the running game was going, everything was working up front and in the trenches. As soon as the O-line took a step backwards and took two steps backwards and then started getting blown backwards, everything fell apart for this offense. And in the last 6 games, I mean, you saw it all over the CBS broadcast. The last 6 games, the Steelers are getting outscored in the first half at an alarming rate.
And they're not scoring either.
And they're not scoring. They're just not putting points up in the first half of football games. And it all starts and ends with the offensive line. We can sit here and talk about why in the world are they giving Ray McLeod the ball. We can sit here and talk about why Deontay Johnson isn't more a part of the game plan. We can talk about why Najee Harris doesn't get the ball at certain times. We could talk about Ben Roethlisberger. We can do everything that we want to do with this football team. But at the end of the day, it starts on the offensive line and it ends on the offensive line. And because that offensive line, let's just call it what it is, they stink. This team stinks.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a nice way to put it. And they really, the offense isn't helping the defense by any means. And again, I mean, it starts up front. They've been banged up. They're young. They're inexperienced. And that's just a recipe for disaster at any level. I mean, you want to have success up front. You need to have success up front to be good. And for the longest time, the Steelers had that. They had Villanueva when he was able to block and not be a turnstile. They had Pouncey. They had DeCastro. They had those studs. They had those guys that were really good up front. But, age is a weird thing because you get older, you get slower. You're not like Andrew Whitworth for the Rams, where he's offensive lineman at age 40. And that obviously that's a position where you just don't see that. And these guys they're inexperienced. They're learning on the fly. Green wasn't a center in college. He's learning that position. And that's the most important position up front.
Yep.
And then you just have nothing to go along with them. And it's not the fault of those guys. There's nothing the Steelers can do. And it sucks. And they need to get better up front. And the same thing on the defensive side of the football, because they do need help over there too. It can't just be Cam and TJ all the time. And as great as those two players are,
it's not enough in the NFL, man.
Right.
2 players on when it's an 11-guy unit, 2 guys aren't going to cut it. Joker Smoker says they were playing press man. I assume he means the Chiefs. They were playing press man most of the game, but we didn't make them pay for it. The Steelers didn't make them pay for playing press man. I get what you're saying, man. But where I'm at with it is if the play doesn't have time to develop because of what's happening at the line, they can do whatever they want to do in coverage, and it's not going to matter. The plays need time to develop. The routes need time to develop. You need 3 seconds for wide receivers to get downfield, to get out of their cuts, to make some kind of move to get the defensive backs to miss or to lose that step. And I know it sounds like a broken record, and I know it sounds like a cliche, but everything that's wrong with this offense starts with the offensive line, because if you don't have time for a play to develop in the passing game, if you don't have time for wide receivers to get through their routes, the quarterback can't get the ball downfield, and he's going to face pressure. If you don't block for your running backs, if holes aren't there, if you run a toss play on 4th and 1 and there's 5 Kansas City Chiefs players to 1 offensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's not going to work. It doesn't matter how good Najee Harris is. Najee Harris on that 4th and 1 play could have been Walter Payton and Jim Brown combined into one player, and he wouldn't have gotten that first down because there was no room for him to go anywhere. It starts and ends with the offensive line. And trust me, man, I understand when you see that press man coverage, when you see things, when you see holes in other teams' defenses, and you see, man, the Steelers should be taking advantage of that. The gut reaction is to say, yeah, we didn't make them pay for it, or we didn't do this, or we didn't do that, or the Steelers didn't do this or didn't do that. But again, it doesn't matter. If the offensive line isn't giving the quarterback time, you could have nobody on those wide receivers.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you have to have time to develop, but I don't think the Steelers receivers are good enough to beat that secondary. They just weren't. They just didn't play good enough football today. And you're going to have that. And what's baffling and mind-boggling to me, and I think everybody else that's tuned into this or will be tuned into this, they're still not out of the playoff hunt. It's still hard, and they still play the Browns and the Ravens. The Ravens are vulnerable because half their team is out with illnesses. The Browns are, of course, the Browns. So I mean, it's kind of embarrassing the way the AFC is, but they're just not they're just not capable of that. And those receivers, I mean, you need more out of Claypool. And listen, if you're going to alternate series with him and Deontay Johnson, what are you doing? Like, you're not helping anybody. I understand
Right.
that Claypool's in the doghouse for his immaturity and some of his antics and actions, but damn, man, like let the kid play. You don't have the opportunity to send a message this late in the season when you have a chance to make the playoffs at
Yeah,
seven,
that's a
seven,
really
and
good point,
one.
Jarrod. Yep. Here's one that's kind of going towards that, the players on the roster kind of thing. Robert Long says won't see the playoffs for 3 years, and by then you'll be lucky to find 10 players on this current roster who will still be there. I kind of agree with that, and I kind of disagree with that. Here's my take on the Steelers football team. They're an offensive line and a defensive line away, and I realize that's a lot. That's 8 players, but they're closer than I think people think. If they can get a competent quarterback and rebuild this offensive line, rebuild the defensive line, and I'm not saying quarterback is the issue. I'm just saying, let's be real. I don't think Ben's coming back next year. So they've got young guys at key positions. Deontay Johnson's a third or fourth year guy. They've got Chase Claypool, who's a second-year guy, and I really think if Chase Claypool gets the mental side of this game together, he is going to be a stud. I really like his game. They've got Najee Harris, who's a rookie. They've got Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is a fourth-year guy. He's coming up on a new deal, but he's in his mid to early, like mid-20s. They've got TJ Watt, who's young, and he's locked up long-term. They've got I like what they have as far as the young guys on the defensive line. I really like what I'm seeing from Isaiah Loudermilk. I think he's got a bright future. They've got. I still think that there's some tread on Devin Bush's tires. I realize people aren't happy with him this year, but you've got to understand the injury that he came back from. It may take some time for him to get back to where he was. I really think that the Steelers, if they make the right moves in the offseason, are going to be right back, in a competitive position. I'm not saying they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. They're going to be in a competitive position. But if Stephon Tuitt comes back next year, Cam Hayward sticks around, you don't need to do much to the defensive line, and you get the offensive line figured out. You've got the cap space to do it. Get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you have depth. You need depth defensively. I think Joe Hayden's still got some life left. And Minkah Fitzpatrick is your focal point at the back end of the secondary, back end of the defense. Offensively, I would sign Juju, in my personal opinion,
Yep.
only because you know what you're going to get from him. And he's a new generation player. He's a next generation player. In the fact that he's going to do things a lot differently than what we expect. He's no Hines Ward. He's no guy like that. That's really going to, he's going to do what Juju does. What makes Juju great is he's personable off the field. He has a personality. We're not really used to that unless it's a hard-nosed personality. So I would sign him, and that's going to release some pressure for Johnson and Claypool. And that, like, let's be real, Raymond McLeod is a situational receiver at best. Same thing with James Washington. I think James Washington's a good second or third guy, but let's be real. On this team, he's got to be one of the top guys now because they don't have a choice. They need a quarterback. I don't think Mason Rudolph is the answer by any means, but very fitting that a guy named Rudolph plays on Christmas weekend. They have the tight end number 1. They have Freiermuth. They have Najee Harris. If they can fix things up front and really just get those guys to grow and mature, on top of getting Tuitt back and Alualu, they're going to be good. They're not going to light the world on fire, but right now, you don't have to light the world on fire in the AFC.
No, you don't. And this is an interesting topic here from Chris B. Don't you think Chris B from YouTube, he says, don't you think as Steelers fans we tend to overhype our average level guys? 2 guys are Pro Bowl level, maybe DJ, but it's not unfair that he didn't get in. I think that is true with most fan bases, Chris. I do think that there is a level of overhyping guys, but I also think there's a level of overly criticizing guys when they're not playing as well as as we would like them as fans and media to play. I think that a perfect example of the opposite of that is Devin Bush. Devin Bush has not been good this year, but I don't think that that it's fair to judge Devin Bush's entire future on 8 bad football games coming off of an ACL tear. On the flip side of that, yeah, there's guys on the offense who we definitely that are definitely overhyped. I think that James Washington is the opposite of what I was saying with Devin Bush. James Washington came in and everyone talked about, man, if you got James Washington as your 4th wide receiver, that's a great position to be in. James Washington just didn't show up this year. He really didn't play that well this year, and we still even myself for earlier in the show talked about James Washington getting more should be getting more touches. But let's be real. What has James Washington done to deserve that this year? So, yeah, I see where you're coming from, Chris, where, guys do get overhyped sometimes. But if you think of everybody, to my last point, everyone that I was talking about, those are all Pro Bowl level guys. I mean, they really are. Minka is generally a Pro Bowl level guy. Cam and TJ, I know those are the 2 you're talking about. Deontay Johnson, I do think he should have gotten in. I think Najee Harris is going to be a Pro Bowl level. I think Najee Harris is an all-pro level running back. That dude is special. I would have liked to see them go offensive line in the draft, but I'm not complaining that the Steelers have Najee Harris. So to your point, Chris, yes, I do think that happens. But it is what it is. I mean, they're not producing, so you got to you got to deal with it,
And I think to the extent too is that Steeler fans and even us in the media, we watch the Steelers religiously on Sundays. So we only see the games that we watch. We only see Deontay Johnson play receiver. We don't get to see maybe for perspective like a Marquise Brown or whoever for the Ravens, unless it's the 2 times a year that we play them, not that we or the Steelers play them. So we see it through a different lens because we see those players every game. We see them play 16, 17 games a year plus preseason. So, yeah, we have a little bit different of opinion than, say, somebody for the Rams that we don't really see, or somebody on the West Coast that we don't always see. So, yeah, there's a lot of overhype there. It's like the Pirates, right? Brian Reynolds. We think Brian Reynolds is the greatest player alive because he's the best player the Pirates have. Well, we see what he does every game, right? And we see what David Bednar does every game, but not everybody is capable of doing that. You see that in the awards for a lot of different places. So, I mean, you take it with a grain of salt, but, it's a lot of these people, like for James Washington, well, how many opportunities is he getting? But how much of that is the game plan? How much are they just really not giving a crap about getting him involved in the game plan? Or are those games dictating his role? Because obviously the last so many games, the Steelers have been down in the first half, and so you got to throw the ball more. You're not able to run the football. You're not able to control the clock. And the offensive line, being as miserable as it is, you're not really able to get Najee Harris up to speed. And I mean, I thought he had a decent game today, but there's just a lot that goes into it that just makes it so much harder to evaluate just on the surface level.
Yeah, and here's a comment, not to make a quick right turn here, but a comment that I want to talk about. Green talking about Kendrick Green was so bad today he got benched. Here's my thing with Kendrick Green. I don't think Kendrick Green is a good offensive lineman at all, but I don't blame him for everything that he's going through right now. I blame the organization and the coaching staff a lot. They drafted him in the 3rd round as a center. He played 4 games at Illinois as a center. 4 games, okay? He was not a center in college. He was a guard in college. So what the Steelers did was took a guard who played 4 games at center and said, we're going to have you learn how to play center at the NFL level on the fly as a rookie. And, oh, yeah, we're going to start you week 1. That's unfair. You can call it what it is. Maybe tell me I'm being too easy on the guy. That's fine. It's unfair. He has stunk, but it's not all Kendrick Green's fault because they put him in a no-win situation and they put him in a place where it was him against the world, and he's getting slaughtered out there.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel for the kid because, I've seen this at Penn State. For those of you that are tuning in, for the last few years, I've been the Penn State beat writer here at DK Pittsburgh Sports, and their offensive line at multiple times has been just abysmal, especially this year. And even with Saquon Barkley, who was an all-world college athlete, it's so tough to develop offensively. And when you're learning on the fly, these offensive lines, man, they're tough. Center is the toughest position because you're making calls. And the game is just so different at the NFL level compared to collegiately. So, I mean, the Steelers drafted him. They knew what they wanted to do with him. I think he's going to develop into a very good center. But it's just so tough because you have a player that's playing out of position, learning on the fly as a rookie. If he is the second or third year guy, I think it's a little bit different. But he's right out of college. Last year was a different year, difficult year for everybody. Now you want him to come in and do this. It's a complete huge adjustment period for him, and unfortunately we're seeing it play out week after week after week. Our Tom Reed discussed this in his practice report on Friday. It's not like the Steelers are playing bad teams. They're going against Kansas City. They're going against the Chargers. They're going against these teams that are pretty damn good every week, save for the Rams, who of course they tied. But it's just one of those situations where it's trial by fire, and he's just getting blasted by the fire right now.
Yeah. We've got time for one more, and I don't want to just already go straight to the offseason, but with the offensive line talk and the quarterback talk, obviously people, want to know what it's going to look like for the future of the team. So I think this is the most logical situation. I think we look for a quarterback in free agency or via trade. I agree with that. I think that, if the Steelers are going to be a good football team next year, they're not going to do it by drafting a quarterback. Okay. Everybody that loves Kenny Pickett, I love Kenny Pickett too. I think that Kenny Pickett is going to be a solid NFL quarterback, but don't expect the Steelers to draft him. All right. The reason why is because I don't care if you have Joe Montana back there, quarterback right now. Behind this offensive line, they're not going to do anything good. All right. So what the Steelers need to do in this draft coming up is go heavy offensive line, heavy defensive line, I think. Maybe get a defensive back. It's not the sexy picks. It's not the picks that make the splash, but that's the kind of pick that's going to get you into a competitive situation. They need to draft an offensive lineman bad. They need to draft a defensive lineman bad. From there, I think you find a quarterback in free agency. Or listen. I know what the comments are going to say as soon as this comes out of my mouth. I don't care. I want to see what Dwayne Haskins has. I don't know that he is a long-term solution at quarterback, but I would love to see what a former first-round pick with all of the talent, the physical talent that he has, I would love to see what he could do. That doesn't mean that I think he's going to be the answer, but I would at least love to see him get a chance because I think we've seen enough of Mason Rudolph. I don't think he's the real answer at quarterback. So I think realistically the Steelers go after a quarterback in free agency. I don't think we're going to see them go trade for anybody because they're not going to give up any picks. They're not going to give up a lot of collateral for a quarterback. So I would like to see them either free agency go after a quarterback or, maybe give Dwayne Haskins a little bit more of a chance in training camp next year and preseason next year, see what he has, see if you have something there. But as far as the draft goes, as far as anything else goes, absolutely 100% go after the offensive and defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts up front. I mean, the guy that you're going to pick up in the draft, I don't think they're going to be the franchise QB. I mean, would it be poetic if it was Kenny Pickett? Absolutely. Do I think he will have success at the NFL level? Yes. Is it success in Pittsburgh? Probably not. That is the sexiest pick for the Steelers. But again, he's not going to be – honestly, the Steelers drafting him would be doing him a disservice because with this offensive line the way that it is now, he'll be spending more time looking up at the blue skies at Heinz Field rather than the goalposts or the scoreboards. And so for me, the guy that they have to get is going to be a stopgap. He's a guy maybe with 2 or 3 quality years left in his career, or looking for a reclamation project, maybe a Haskins, maybe that is where you give extended looks to, because Rudolph had his chance and he did not have the greatest of performances, last year when Ben was hurt. So he's had his chance. He's had plenty of chances, and yet still has done nothing to prove that he is the future. He is the answer when Ben Roethlisberger retires. But you have to reload up front. You have to reload and get depth defensively. They have the skill position players on offense. I think, you add another receiver. I think if you add Juju, that's great. If you want to go out and get another premier receiver, I think that's good. You've got Najee Harris. You've got Pat Freiermuth, and even Zach Gentry is, I think, a good number 2 tight end. So, you've got the skill position players. You just got to develop up front. And then defensively, you reload and you hope that Tuitt comes back and that Bush comes back and he's better than this year. It's really weird. We haven't really talked about we haven't talked about Devin Bush this week. It's been refreshing because he didn't play. He had COVID. It's one of the few things that he's caught all year. But, it's just one of those things. It's tough coming back from an ACL tear and playing in a position where you have to move laterally and north and south, essentially at the same time. So, it sucks for him because as a guy of his nature and where they drafted him, he gets the brunt of the issues because he's this highly touted guy and he's not living up to those expectations. I say this all the time is once you get to campus, you lose all of your stars. You lose your recruiting status. But when you get to the NFL, you're just an NFL player. You're not, while your draft pick is associated with you forever, it's also could be used as a detriment. And yeah, Gary Morgan just pops up on our screen here. They went heavy line this year. Well, hey, they got to develop. Young guys develop. Offensive line is the toughest position. You have to know what you're doing every single play. Up front, your blocking scheme. Do I think that they make a change at offensive line coach? Yes. I think that he ends up in Oregon, just like he's been linked. And I think you have to go a different way than Matt Canada because it's just not getting the job done. At this point, let Ben run the offense, run the no huddle, and you might actually have some success because he's going to be able to throw it to Deontay Johnson and stay the hell away from Ray McCloud.
Yep. That about wraps it up. There's one more thing I want to touch on before we go because I've seen it about 50 times in the comments section. Everybody asking about Stephon Tuitt. James says, please explain about Tuitt. I'll touch on this very quickly because this is all we have. There is nothing on Tuitt. The Steelers are being very silent about what is going on with Stephon Tuitt. We know that he had knee surgery, and we know that we know the family situation with his brother passing away. That is all we have on Stephon Tuitt. The Steelers have been quiet. Stephon Tuitt's camp has been quiet. We know nothing. And the way I look at it, when there's a family tragedy like that, you give people the time that they need. I'm not going to talk about it more than that. That's all we've got on Stephon Tuitt. If you want to add anything to that, Jarrod, I mean, that's all I've got for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. 1, 2, 3. The good news for the Steelers is they only punted 3 times. Speaking of family tragedies, President Harvin lost his father this on Christmas morning, and thoughts and prayers
for
go
that
out to
family.
him.
Absolutely, 100%.
And and it makes sense now if you think about it. Last week they mentioned that he got to see his son play, and I think that's an incredible story, incredible moment for those guys. And we give Harvin a tough time all the time about his quality of punts. He's a rookie. Again, we're talking about an adjustment period that's unlike anything that we've ever experienced. And if you're dealing with something off the field like that, where your head might not be completely fully invested, and obviously it's clear that his father was dying, and it's a shame to have to go with as somebody that lost their parent, especially holidays are always tough, and to lose a parent on a holiday, my thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family in this tough time, because it's not going to be something that he's going to be able to get over and maybe play next week or even the rest of the season, to be perfectly honest with you. So you have to be cognizant of that. You don't know what people are really going through off the field. You see what they do between the white lines. You see the tablets that they shatter on the sidelines. I see you, Tom Brady. But you see that. You see what the cameras show you. But once they go into that locker room, they go home, it's completely different. And I think that's what you have to kind of be cognizant of as fans and in the media, that people have different lives. That it isn't defined by the logo that they wear or their name on the back of a jersey. But there are trials and tribulations that these players and these coaches and these people go through each and every day that we are just not aware of. And it explains his performance, in my opinion, because if he's not fully invested, yeah, I would have a hell of a hard time trying to punt a football. If in the back of my mind is that I don't know if my dad's going to make it till tomorrow.
Yeah. And again, like as you said, thoughts and prayers to Presley Harvin and his family for what they're dealing with. That's it for us today. This was not a fun one to talk about by any stretch of the imagination. But one thing about Steelers fans, we're in this together. Hopefully, we'll be back if you hang out till later on tonight. DK and Dale will have a Steelers Today episode that'll be coming to you from Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. But for Jarrod, Prugar, and DK Pittsburgh Sports, I'm Eddie Provident. Thanks for hanging out with us in the comment section. Thanks for all your questions and all your interaction with us. Hope that you had a happy holidays, happy New Year, and we will catch you next time.